Welcome back to another episode where we dive into the quirks and twists of the rental world. Ever heard of an N12 form? If not, you're in for a roller coaster ride of contradictions. It's an eviction notice, but with a plot twist that you probably didn't see coming. In Ontario, landlords can't just evict tenants because their socks don't match or for any trivial reason. They need a legitimate reason, like wanting to move back into the property themselves or having an immediate family member or caregiver move into the unit. That's where the N12 form comes into play. It's the official document that landlords use to start this process. It's not as simple as saying, "My third cousin twice removed needs a place to crash." There are strict guidelines to follow. The Landlord and Tenant Board, or LTB, has a set of rules and regulations about these types of evictions. One error and the whole thing can get tossed and you'll have to start over. And trust me, you don't want to mess with the LTB. They take these matters very seriously, and if you do it wrong, you can face fines in the tens of thousands of dollars. They're like the referees of the rental world, and they always get the last word. They ensure that both parties play fair, though the legislation really is stacked to benefit tenants. So buckle up as we explore the wild world of N12 forms, LTB hearings, and the delicate dance between landlords and tenants. It's a complex process that requires careful navigation. It's going to be a bit bumpy, but hopefully not too devastating of a ride. Stay tuned as we unravel the intricacies of the N12. All right, landlords, listen up. If you've ever tried to navigate the labyrinth of rental regulations, you know it's no joke. Filling out an N12 form is like trying to assemble furniture with instructions in Swedish. You might think you're making progress, but then you realize you've sunk your own battleship. It's confusing, frustrating, and might leave you questioning your sanity. You might even start to wonder if you're cut out for this landlord gig. First, you need to give the correct notice period. This isn't just a suggestion, it's a legal requirement. That's 60 days, not 60 minutes, no matter how eager you are to move in. Timing is everything, and getting it wrong can cost you big time. And don't forget, the day you deliver the notice does not count in that 60-day period. Get a calendar out and do it right. Then, you'll need to provide all the details. Your name, the tenant's name, the address of the rental unit, the basics. But don't forget, every detail counts. Here's the kicker. You need to prove you have a genuine reason for evicting the tenant. This isn't just about wanting a change of tenant. You need to show that you or your family member actually intend to occupy the unit for at least a year. This means you can't just kick out a tenant on a whim. There are rules to follow. Don't forget the compensation. You must pay the tenant before the termination date given, even if the tenant says they're not going to move. It's either pay them or give them a free month of rent before that termination date. You don't have to use the last month's rent yet, so that won't come into play unless they leave. And the free month you give them cannot be their last month's rent. Read the form, then go read it again. If you've made a single error, the adjudicator will likely toss your application and you will need to start over. So, let's say you served your tenant with an N12 notice and you've done it correctly. Now what? This is just the beginning of a potentially long and winding journey if the tenant decides not to vacate. Now, get ready for the main event, a hearing at the Landlord and Tenant Board. This is where the real action happens, and it's not for the faint of heart. Picture it as a courtroom drama, but instead of black and white laws, the adjudicator gets to decide on things like a tenant's desire to remain, a sob story, or simply because. An adjudicator has a ton of latitude. Section 83 of the RTA gives the adjudicator powers referred to as relief from eviction. Both the landlord and the tenant get to tell their side of the story. It's a chance for each party to present their case in front of the board. The landlord needs to convince the LTB that their reason for eviction is legit. This often involves presenting a lot of evidence and making a strong argument. The tenant, on the other hand, might try to prove that the landlord is being shady. They could bring their own evidence and even call witnesses to support their claims. Sometimes it's a slam dunk for the landlord. The evidence is clear, and the decision is straightforward. Other times, it's a recipe for disaster. The case might not go as planned, leading to unexpected outcomes, or even the dreaded Section 83, where the adjudicator refuses an eviction even though they acknowledge the landlord is within their rights, and every now and then it's a train wreck that you just couldn't see coming. The unpredictability of these hearings can make them quite stressful. Tenant rights. Tenants have rights too, usually way more than the landlord. Tenants are not completely powerless in this whole N12 saga. If they have a valid reason to stay, you can be guaranteed the adjudicator will listen intently. A tenant has the right to challenge the N12 notice. They don't have to move out just because you ask them to. They can milk the delay for months and months. If a tenant thinks their landlord is evicting them for bogus reasons, they can take the landlord to the LTB and fight back. Second, even if the LTB sides with the landlord, the tenant might be entitled to compensation, even more than what is listed on the N12 application. It's like winning a consolation prize for having to move out. A landlord has become a glorified bank account for many a tenant. So, landlords, brush up on your tenant rights and get ready for a battle where the onus is on the landlord to prove their case. There is no such thing as innocent until proven guilty with an N12 application. It's quite the opposite. Landlord landmines. How to avoid blowing up your case. Landlords, navigating the N12 process is like walking through a minefield. One wrong step and boom, your case goes up in smoke. One common pitfall is not having a good enough reason for eviction. Remember, wanting to renovate and charge higher rent isn't a valid reason. Another mistake is not following the proper procedures, not counting the termination date correctly, or not paying the compensation on time. The LTB is all about the details, so make sure you dot your I's and cross your T's. Otherwise, you might as well kiss your case goodbye. And finally, don't cross the line, stop maintenance, harass your tenant, or be a bad landlord. Being a bad landlord is cause enough for an eviction to be denied. Keep doing your job, and eventually the nightmare will end. So let's say you win and get your order for eviction. It doesn't end there. Receiving the order could take months. Getting the sheriff out to evict could take more months. And that's providing the tenant doesn't get a stay of eviction. But if you're lucky, you get your eviction and you or your family member finally gets to move in. It's not over yet. The tenant still has a year to sue you if they think you didn't adhere to the N12 requirements.